Hey everyone, it's Marvin. If you think the US needs better representation for minorities, especially during this election season, then you should check out The Future of Our Former Democracy, the chart-topping history podcast from More Equitable Democracy and Large Media. Each week on The Future of Our Former Democracy, hosts George Chung and Colin Cole dive into what our democracy could look like if we left behind our current winner-take-all model and embraced a fairer, more proportional system. If you need somewhere to start on this podcast, I recommend listening to the first episode where George discusses how his identity as a queer Asian American fueled his activism and commitment to social justice. Follow The Future of Our Former Democracy wherever you get your podcasts.
You're listening to Whoa! Potluck.
And hey everyone, welcome to Books and Boba, a book club and podcast featuring books by Asian and Asian American authors. My name is Marvin Yue.
And I'm Rira Yu.
And we are here for our November 2024 mid-month book news check-in, where we go over and highlight some of the latest Asian American related book and publishing news. As always, Books and Boba is supported in part by our listeners. So if you've been enjoying our podcast and would like to become a bigger part of our book club, head on over to patreon.com/booksandboba, where you can become an official member of our book club and receive access to our members-only Discord server, as well as monthly bonus podcasts. We just released this month's Boba Chat earlier this week, where Rira and I go over some of our thoughts regarding the recent electoral results, as well as give some exciting updates on what's been going on in our personal lives. So if you are already a Patreon supporter at the Honey Boba level, you can listen to that right now. And for the rest of you who are interested in becoming a bigger part of our book club, we definitely invite you to check it out. All right. With that being said, Rira, how are you doing today?
I'm doing surprisingly well. I think I'm kind of like at that stage where I'm like, yeah, like I'm devastated, but also like I'm not gonna react. I'm gonna try and be proactive in like building community and all that, which is, part of doing this podcast. We're building community. And I was just like thinking about how I was just reflecting on what was happening election night, and like people were like texting me being like, oh my God, like Georgia got called. It's like, it looks like we're living under another Trump administration. And around that point, I was just like, I'm going to go watch National Treasure and have like a couple glasses of beer, maybe an edible, and just, numb myself.
Yeah, it definitely got to the point where it's like, we've seen this show before, right? Like, we started this podcast in 2016. It kind of feels like things have just made a loop, except things are worse. But I think for me, it really does listen on what we can do to help. In particular, how this podcast can still be like a force for good in like these dark times. And, the good news is, even though the world seems to be burning around us, books are still being announced. And, we have a pretty, relatively at least healthy pipeline of books by Asian and Asian American authors coming down the line for readers of all ages. And I think that's something that we can still find a little bit of solace in. Let's get into it. As always, we start off our mid-month check-ins by highlighting some of the latest Asian American publishing announcements compiled by Veera through Publishers Weekly and other online sources. Rira, what is the first book deal for this episode?
Yeah, so our first book deal is In a Preempt, Viking Took World Rights to Neel Patel's The Offer. The book is a provocative, taut, and suspenseful novel that follows a young South Asian woman in deep debt who gets caught in the power play of a wealthy couple, both of whom seem to be singularly obsessed with her. And no publication date has been announced.
This sounds harrowing, but also like I'm very interested in like getting some Knives Out vibes.
Yeah,
kind of,
I was about to say, it really does give out like Knives Out vibes. And of course, like the whole message of wealthy people using poor people to afford their entertainment. So
Yeah, definitely some Parasite vibes as well. You know, the difference between the classes, how like rich people and working class people fundamentally look at the world differently. And, you know, I feel like that's something that I really enjoy when books explore, because sometimes it feels like people don't realize how differently rich people see the world than they do.
I think a lot of people do understand it. It's just the people who don't are very vocal. And I am curious as to like what the offer is. Must be something ludicrous.
Yeah, like probably an obscene amount of money to do something that's like maybe a little morally dubious. I guess we'll find out. But yeah, congrats to Neel on their book deal. Next up, Bloomsbury has bought in an exclusive submission Benny's Bright Qing Ming, a picture book by Michelle Jing Chan, which follows a boy as he prepares a surprise gift for his beloved uncle he's been waiting all year to see at the Tomb Sweeping Festival and holiday. Publication is planned for spring 2027. So Qingming means...
I was about to ask you, what is Qingming?
So Qingmingjie is the Chinese festival where family members go to tidy up the grave markers of their, you know, family members who have passed, leave offerings, and kind of just pay their respects.
Yeah, we kind of do that in Chuseok, because Chuseok is like not Lunar New Year, sorry. Chuseok is the Harvest Moon Festival, and it lasts like 3 days, I think. So like one of those days, the family goes and cleans up the grave and do offerings and all that jazz.
Yeah. I think, Qingming has been brought up in a lot of Asian American media. I think it was like a plot point in, I want to say Shang-Chi made a mention to it. I appreciate the fact that this blurb did not call it Chinese Halloween, which I've seen it be referred to several times, because it's like, it's a different thing, right? So, as someone who, again, is about to become a dad, being able to pass down like traditions, it has become like front in mind to me in terms of like, I personally don't know all the Chinese holidays, just the big ones. And Qingming, this is definitely a holiday where it's always been something that my parents handled. Like, okay, they need to remind me when it's time to go to like temple or the cemetery and stuff. So have a new appreciation for books like these that can help me communicate these traditions to my kids.
Yeah, I mean, like for diasporans who, you know, don't live in the motherland, it's kind of hard to celebrate these kinds of traditions, especially like with tomb sweeping. I'm like, yeah, you're not living where your family is buried. So it's very hard to just, you know, be able to take care of their graves. So don't be too hard on yourself. I mean, we're a different generation. We have different lives. So. All right, next up, Sleeping Bear Press bought world rights to Melodies of the Sitar by Shachi Kaushik and illustrated by Geeta Ladi. And the book is about a girl who feels alone after the loss of her grandmother and needs to find a way to reconnect with the memories and music that Nani left behind. Publication is scheduled for fall 2026.
Lots of grieving kids books this month. This is like our second in a row.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that everyone goes through. And when you're young, you don't really have that concept of life and death. So it's a very painful subject for parents to teach their kids. So I'm guessing that these books will help quite a bit.
Yeah, especially since this book is a little different than the last one because it's dealing with a more recent loss and, you know, being able to communicate that grief through music and culture. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I've never watched Coco, but this kind of reminds me of Coco because like everyone talks about like the music and like how it's kind of related to celebrating the lives of those who passed away. So I was like, interesting.
You should watch Coco. It's really more about it's like a journey to the underworld type of show.
Okay.
Yeah. But music is a big part of it for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Next up, First Second has acquired world rights to Jennifer Lee and LeUyen Pham's YA graphic novel As I Dream of You, a supernatural romance that involves lucid dreaming. Publication is scheduled for 2026.
So have you ever had lucid dreams?
Oh, all the time.
Like,
Way more than it's probably.
What do you dream of?
Just like mundane things. Like the most recent one I can remember was I found myself back in grad school, and there was a paper that I was very late in doing. And so I was like rushing to finish this paper because it was going to be like 90% of my grade. I remember freaking out about it and then waking up and like, wait, I haven't been in school in like years. What am I thinking about? Why am I dreaming about this?
I love how no matter how many years pass, like everyone has that dream of, like academic trauma.
For sure.
Like my lucid dreams are so stupid. Like I have dreams where I dream of waking up and checking my emails and messages and answering them, but it's a dream, right? So they didn't actually get sent out. So I wake up for real and I'm like, oh, like let me check if I actually like sent those messages, because I wasn't really like awake, but maybe I did. And then I'll check. And sometimes I did send those messages out. So I just don't have like really good recollection of it. But yeah, this is a supernatural romance. So I'm guessing they're not going to have nightmares about about being late for classes or answering emails.
Yeah, it seems like they're going to be like courting each other in their dreamscape, which is also a lot of fun. Maybe it's like kind of like
it's also
Inception.
very Asian.
Yeah, Inception, but make it romance, which sounds fun.
Yeah, I was going to say like it's very Asian because like I've seen a lot of dramas where, like characters meet in their dreams. I don't know, maybe it's like an Asian ghost like, tradition thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, next up, Little Brown Acquired Dim Sum Battle by debut author Tony Tong and illustrated by LeUyen Pham. The book is about two Chinese American grandmothers who fight to be the super nicest at dim sum lunch with their granddaughter. Publication is scheduled for fall 2026. Are they fighting for the check?
I think they're just fighting to see who can put the most pieces of hagao onto their granddaughter's plate and making sure. I feel like, yeah, this is a very relatable, at least for me as a Chinese American kid.
Relatives battled it out at the dim sum table?
I mean, it's, the concept of face is something that we're very used to in like Chinese American literature, right? And part of that is the fighting for the bill, but it all stems from this idea that you want to be the most outgoing, the most generous, the most giving person in public, and you will fight for that right. And sometimes the battlefield is at the check, and sometimes the battlefield is the granddaughter's plate and their favor.
I've only had one situation where both of my grandmothers were in the same room. So I've never had like both sides of like my grandparents interact with each other. So yeah, it is kind of like a foreign concept to me. But I have seen many of my parents' friends fighting over stupid things to save face. So I guess it is kind of familiar.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely part of, I don't know, part of the culture, part of like the expectation.
Let me show you how generous I am, how wealthy I am, how smart my children are. Yeah, everything is kind of like a little battle.
It sounds like it's a kid's book, so I'm assuming it's going to have a happy ending where the grandmothers find in themselves like, oh, we both love this kid, so let's be friends.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Well, love the title, and I'm sure it has a lot of yummy dim sum food. Yeah.
All right. Next up, Simon & Schuster has bought producer Priya Swaminathan's debut middle grade novel, Deepa MD, as well as a sequel. Deepa MD is about a girl who dives into the world of solving others' medical mysteries, even as she comes to terms with her own chronic illness. Publication is scheduled for spring 2026.
So like a middle grade house in a way.
Kind of, yeah. Except I'm hoping that this little girl is not a jerk to everyone around her. But it does sound very interesting, diving into medical mysteries in a accessible fashion, as well as, exploring themes of like coming to terms with your own limitations and illnesses. I think lots of interesting things that this series can explore.
Yeah, and also just the idea of being able to help other people can help yourself in the end as well. Yeah. So, all right, next up, Penguin Rocky Pond Books bought Newbery Honor author Veera Hiranandani's YA debut, Look Under Me. Leela Keswani, a lonely teen and budding artist growing up in the early 90s suburban New York, enters into a complicated relationship with two boys in her art class. Desperate for a confidant, she writes a letter to her favorite rock star as she tries to work through her new relationships, her biracial interfaith identity, and moving past the long-term grief she and her mother have experienced since her father died in the Pan Am 103 plane bombing. Publication is set for summer 2026.
I feel like I've already been taken on a ride with this description, with it being, lonely teen artist, 90s New York, two boys in her art class, and then her father dying in a famous airplane bombing.
Yeah, it's a lot for a teenager to deal with.
Yeah. But I do love the 90s coming of age story, and I love that we're seeing a lot more of those, because I guess authors these days are of that age. So I did not grow up in New York in the 90s, so interested to explore what that feels like. But definitely, this sounds like a fun in air quotes, right? I'm sure it's gonna be very melodramatic, very messy, but I do like that we're seeing coming of age stories taking place in the 90s with multiracial, diverse protagonists. I think that's always cool.
Yeah, we are a period piece now, you and I.
Yeah. Do you consider yourself a 90s kid?
I am a 90s kid. I was born in 1990, and I guess I am very similar to Leela here. I mean, aside from our names being pretty similar, but I grew up in the 90s in, New Jersey, and we would go to New York pretty frequently. So yeah. But I am a 90s kid, although I would say most of my adolescence, when I came into my own tastes, I guess, and being able to choose my friends and my music and whatnot, that came in the 2000s.
Yeah, I guess that's the question, right? What makes you a 90s kid, right? Is it when you come of age, or is it when you grew up? Because I guess it all applies, right? But I came of age, I was an adolescent in the late 90s, because I was born in the mid 80s. But I don't really consider myself an 80s kid. I still think of myself as a 90s kid too, because that's when a lot of my formative experiences were. So yeah, I wonder, it's, generational culture stuff. It's all a moving target. You can it's not a exact science, but definitely I think you can be both an 80s kid and a 90s kid, the same way you can be both a 90s kid and an aughts kid.
Yeah. Oh my God, this is reminding me of something really funny. So I remember my nephew, he was playing on his his, what was it? It was a handheld Nintendo. Oh, sorry. Nintendo Switch. Okay. I was what was the name of it again? I was Nintendo Wii. And I was no, that's so ancient. No.
I know.
But he was playing on his Nintendo Switch. I forgot what game it was. But I was did you know when I first started playing games, we didn't have color? It used to just be black and white. And he was no way. And I'm yeah. Pokemon? That came only in one color. Pokemon Red, it was red tinted gray. That was all you saw. And I showed him my old DSs because we still have all of them. And he was just oh my gosh, this is what is this ancient technology?
It's that scene from Back to the Future 2. It's this is a game for babies.
Yeah, but it was a nice moment because I'm a lot of the games that you enjoy now, this is where it started. Pokemon and Mario, those are games that I grew up with, but they were, it was a different time, different challenges.
I have this idea of my kid's first game system isn't going to be a Switch. It's going to be one of those NES boxes. You're going to play the games I played when I was your age, and then we work your way up.
Yeah. No VR for you until you're 13.
All right. Our next deal. Putnam has bought debut author Yuvashri Harish's Kill Your Darlings, a YA horror novel pitched as Hocus Pocus meets Madeleine Rue. In the novel, two teens accidentally unleash the monsters of their favorite horror stories and the witch who wrote them on their small town on Halloween night. Publication is set for fall 2026. I love it. I love stories where teens accidentally release the instruments of their own doom. It's a very classic horror trope, like Evil Dead and all those like Cabin in the Woods stories. And the Hocus Pocus angle is really interesting too.
Yeah, I was thinking, I was like, oh yeah, Hocus Pocus. Like that, like I can sense the vibes. And also I love the title, Kill Your Darlings, because that is like a thing in writing for those of you who are unfamiliar with the term. It means like not everything you write is going to be precious, and revising is rewriting and getting rid of things that, you know.
Yeah. I wonder if this is like an allegory for writing your novel. That'd be funny too. I wonder if the witch will become a teammate, because who's killing whose darlings, right?
Yeah.
This sounds like a lot of fun, and looking forward to, I guess it's going to be out for Halloween in 2 years.
Yeah. All right, next up, Owl Kids acquired world rights to Simmy and Maddy's Snow Day by debut author Pawan Singh and illustrated by Meneka Repka. In this wordless picture book that celebrates friendship, creative collaboration, and belonging, two girls build and dress a snow person in a unique twist on a snow day tradition. Publication is scheduled for fall 2026.
This sounds cute. I have a confession to make. I have never built a snowman.
You've never built a snowman?
Well, I've never really lived anywhere that had snow as a kid. No, that's not true. We did build a tiny snowman once when I was at a leadership camp in high school. But it was like barely a snowman.
Yeah.
Do you have snowman experiences, Veera?
Yes. Many years of snow, of living up in the East Coast and just shoveling the driveway. Yeah, like I've never really been a big fan of snow. Like, I feel like my first snowman, I was coerced into making it by like my cousins, and because I was just like, it's cold and wet and I don't like it. So
yeah,
which is why I don't live in the East Coast anymore.
Yeah, when I lived in the East Coast, I lived in an apartment, so we didn't really have like a field to like play in. But this sounds like fun. I mean, when you're a kid, you make snowmen, and I love that this seems like it's a very like, you know, there's going to be some unorthodox snowman traditions, which is fun.
I remember in Georgia, we did have like a week where it did snow quite heavily. And I did make a snowman because I was just so excited and kind of weirded out by like, wow, there's enough snow in the South that we can make a snowman. It was very tiny, but it was still a snowman. So I was like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, next up, Workman Kids has acquired world English rights to Lots and Lots of Ocelots by Vicky Pham and illustrated by Angel Chang. The picture book playfully uses animal facts to teach the math concept skip counting. Publication is slated for summer 2026.
I had to look up what an ocelot was.
Oh, I know what an ocelot was because I played Metal Gear Solid, and there's a character there named Ocelot who's like, whenever he appears, there's like a cat sound behind them.
It's a medium-sized spotted wildcat for those who are just like me, being like, "What the hell is an ocelot? Is it like a numerical term?"
I need to go look up what skip counting is.
Is it like counting like 2, 4, 6?
Yeah, I found it. Yeah, skip counting is a mathematical technique taught as a kind of multiplication in reform mathematics. So yeah, in skip counting by twos, a person can count to 10 by only naming every other even number. Yeah, so it's kind of
like knowing your multiplications, pretty much.
Yeah, I guess.
Okay, interesting.
I feel like this is stuff that we did as like, at least I did as like a Chinese kid growing up with like multiplication tables. But
they teach math differently.
Oh, believe me, I'm very aware. I'm dreading we'll see how the state of public education is in 6-7 years when my kids finally go to school, but yeah, it's something that I have been aware of for years. And now that I'm staring it in the face, I am like, okay, do I have to learn new math? Can I get away with not learning new math?
I mean, like, I know Gen Alpha is learning math differently from how Gen Z learned it, because the Gen Z version is the lattice method, and it's just like it's kind of like a Punnett square, and I was like, what? So you have to illustrate this every single freaking time you do like a multiplication?
You're just saying words to me. I just, math is math, right? Like, Here's the thing, though. Like, mathematicians know that math is just not just math, right? Like, 1+1 does not necessarily equal 2.
I do remember because like my mom was like very tiger mom when I was younger. So like we covered math like very, very early on in my like childhood. And the math that she taught me was different from the math that they were teaching me in school. So even though I would get the answer correct, my work would be wrong. So I would get points off for that. So I had to relearn math, and it was very frustrating as like a 5-year-old.
I know. The thing is, like, once you become an adult, it's really the result that matters. But I guess
exactly.
it does help that you understand how you got to the point. But like, I feel like there's more than one way to get to the right answer, and if your way works, then that's fine.
I found out that students in Korea, they can't use calculators for their math, like for any of their math classes. I'm like, that is way too intimidating. Because if you think about like the level of math that high schoolers take in Korea, I'm like, dude, calculus without calculators? Yeah.
Once you get to like algebra level, like solving for X and Y, you need that calculator for sure. Or more time. If you don't give me a calculator, then you need to give me an extra hour to do all the calculations.
You need to give me like a lot of paper to do like all of the work.
Yeah.
All right, next up, Penguin Rocky Pond Press acquired Asha Meets Hope by Pooja Ma-khi-jani and illustrated by Nadia Alam. The picture book is about a girl whose extended family jumps into action to provide support when the girl's mother begins to suffer from postpartum depression. Publication is slated for summer 2026. Wow, we're teaching kids postpartum depression? That's great.
Sometimes mom will be a little off after giving birth, and that's okay. I will say, from personal experience, being in a second generation family and seeing my cousins and stuff, the family jumping into action to provide support is not always the best thing. Sometimes
it
they
could
provide
cause
too
a lot
much
more
support.
stress.
Sometimes that support comes in the form of also judgment. Like, that's the price you pay. So, but I'm sure this will be a very hopeful, optimal situation for this girl's family for sure.
Yeah. It is very sweet that the family is, I'm guessing in this book, not judging. As you said, it is a more hopeful take, hopefully.
Yeah.
And it's like, like postpartum depression, I feel like, we know more about it these days, but I'm sure like back then it was like, why can't you just get up and cook for the rest of your family? Who cares? You already had your baby, so the work is done. And,
well, in Chinese culture, there's actually the practice of sitting the month, which is like a month after you give birth, you're not supposed to do anything. Like, everyone kind of takes care of you. They cook for you. You have to eat a certain diet. And it's kind of like, it's interesting that like the postpartum period is kind of built into traditional Chinese like culture.
Healing. Yeah. I mean, like America, it's very individualistic. Because I know like in Europe, they do have better maternity care. So here it's like, you had your baby. All right, you have 2 weeks to recover and come back to work. So. Yeah. So it's nice that there's books like these teaching kids like, like it's okay if mom gets a little sad after having your sibling and this is actually normal.
Yeah, for sure. Our next book deal, Peachtree Teen has bought a YA gothic horror novel by Autumn Krause called Blood Art. Inspired by Jane Eyre, The Portrait of Dorian Gray, and Japanese folklore, the novel is set in a strange English manor where evil muses torment a handsome young artist. These subjects of possessed portraits slip out of their frames to stalk the halls at night, and an 18-year-old half-Japanese girl arrives with secrets of her own. Including a mysterious yokai painting that has appeared on her back and threatens to cover her body entirely. Publication is set for fall 2026.
This sounds like my type of book because I absolutely love Jane Eyre and Portrait of Dorian Gray. I feel like teenage me would have eaten this up.
Yeah, lots of spooky, creepy things happening in this house. You got some ghosts, you got some monsters, you got some body horror probably. It sounds like a good spooky time.
Yeah, I mean, like, think about how creepy it is if you're in like this old English, I don't know, castle, manor, and there's just like a hall of like white people portraits just staring at you at night. It must be so creepy. And I just love the idea of like these portraits just being able to move out of their frame like Harry Potter, you know?
Yeah.
All right, so our final book deal is Putnam Acquired Sibylline, a dark academia YA fantasy by Melissa de la Cruz. It follows 3 friends who are rejected from the title university but infiltrate the elite school to study the arcane discipline of magic, not expecting to uncover Sibylline's dangerous history and their romantic feelings for each other along their way. Publication is slated for spring 2026 with the sequel to follow a year later.
Another Melissa de la Cruz joint.
Dark academia, yes. I love that there is like a growing love for this very specific niche in like YA literature.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like school has always been a great setting for, YA stories, and, academia, also an institution, also full of skeletons in the closet, I think, ripe for drama and intrigue. And, when you add magic to it, it just makes it even more juicier. So,
I saw this. I saw this post a long time ago. It might have been a Tumblr post, but someone wrote, "Oh, you see an evil villain in a book or movie that has like a PhD. They're like a doctor, and the audience thinks, wow, he must be so smart." And then actual academia people and people with PhDs or studying PhDs, they say, he turned evil because academia turned him mad. And I'm like, that sounds like a lot of drama packed in. And I have cousins who like pursued PhDs, and I'm like, yeah, academia, lots of trauma there. And I just love that dark academia, it's bringing magic into like an academic setting, right? So it kind of gives me, I don't want to mention like Harry Potter too much, but it's like Harry Potter, like we grew up with like kids going to magic school, and it was a little bit more lighthearted in the beginning, but now we have like a more like, oh yeah, what if Harry Potter went to college?
I'm getting more like Magicians vibes too, right?
Oh yeah, Magicians by Lev Grossman. Yeah, definitely. Great series.
Yeah. And yeah, that'll do it for our book publication announcements. Let's get into our book news segment. We talked a little bit about this in our Boba chats, but we do want to bring the discourse out into our mid-month episode as well, because if you are on book-related social media, you could not have escaped the drama brewing in book. This is mainly book talk, but I think it's also spilled over to book Twitter, book Instagram, which is, how would you explain this? Just like people realizing that books may have political messages in them?
All right. Well, let me get into it. I actually had to like dig a little bit deeper because like I was seeing a lot of TikToks created by people who were like, yeah, reading is political, duh. And I was like, what is this a response to? Like who made like the dumb statement of reading is not political? So there were actually a couple of creators on TikTok who had this sentiment. And one of them was Lisa Book Rex. And they said in a post last week, when did book talk become political? I am so sick of seeing these reader unfollow parties. You guys, we are here to share books that we all enjoy. We don't need politics ruining a good thing we have going. And for context, Lisa Book Rex is a white girly, and
shocker.
You'll see a trend. You'll see a pattern. And another TikTok creator at Kenzie's, who deleted their account later on, said they wanted people to do better and leave politics out of book talk because it is meant to be a quote unquote safe space. And of course that this has started a whole discourse on book talk. And one of the more prominent figures on book talk, Red Queen author Victoria Aveyard, responded in a TikTok that has now become viral. And she says, if you're going to hold up that argument of let's keep politics out of book talk, but then also not allow people to talk about the politics of those said books, not to actually critically engage in the books, then I'm not quite sure what we can use book talk for at all. I don't know how we're having any kind of disagreement over whether or not books are political, because no piece of art, no book is written in a vacuum, because no artist, no writer, no person exists in a vacuum. We are all products of our upbringing, of our environment, of our context, of our awareness, and of our perspective. And a lot of book bloggers, book talkers that I follow kind of had the same sentiment of like, reading is political. The fact that you're able to read right now, someone fought for that privilege.
Yeah, like on this book club, we love exploring themes of diaspora, immigration, imperialism, because those are inherently political themes that shapes our lives every day. And so, there's this feeling I've been getting more and more as I've been becoming more and more online, which, in this day and age may not be a good thing, and something that I'm definitely thinking about as I'm about to raise children, is like there's like a big like social media industrial complex of storytelling, and like you have TikToks and Instagrammers recapping Reddit threads about like, am I the asshole and all this stuff, and I'm almost certain half of these like big long Reddit essay posts are fake. Like they're just people writing fanfic, right? And the fact is, like, I feel like that also applies to things like book talk and bookstagram. I feel like a lot of the people that are, like you mentioned, complaining about book talk becoming more political are in it for the vibes and for the aesthetics. And I am like, at this point, 80% certain they've never read any of the books that they promote on their sites.
I feel like a lot of them have only read, romance novels. And not to say romance novels aren't political, because they are, but like they're reading like spicy romance novels, and they're reading dark romance, and those things they can kind of like turn off their critical thinking brain and kind of just like go in and just enjoy the vibes, like you said. But if that's the only thing that you're reading, then of course you're going to have a very narrow view of the worlds that books are providing for the rest of the public. So yeah, it's been wild seeing white book talkers talk about how they're kind of sick of seeing talks about politics in the book sphere, when I look at their shelves and they have books like Babel by R.F. Kuang on there, and I'm just like,
that's just a book about good friends at school, just having fun times, like reading, translating, and doing magic. Like, what are you talking about?
And like this, I feel like, I feel like young reader books are definitely political, because it's about having empathy, and it's about rising against empires and being a rebel and having, going against authority and learning to find yourself. These are all political themes.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't like even romance books inherently about power dynamics, right?
Yes, they are. Yeah. Like even with Colleen Hoover books, where there's like an abusive relationship right in the forefront. I mean, like, talks about toxic masculinity and abuse like that. Those are also very political. The fact that women are able to read is political, because if you look at our history, like reading was gatekept for the rich or the religious. So
yeah. So I think it all just like, for me, it reinforces this idea that the people complaining about book talk or books becoming political have never actually read a book in their lives.
Or they just have not digested it. Like, I refuse to fucking believe that you read The Hunger Games and you don't understand that book is political.
Yeah. I made this point in Boba Chat. Like, I can understand, like, it's wrong, but I can understand you maybe mapping, like, the President Snow to like a Joe Biden, right? Like, oh, it's the liberal, he's too liberal, and it's like he's evil. But at least that's political. To say that there's no politics at all in these books is wild, right?
You, like, as a teenager who read the Twilight series, I knew that series was Mormon as fuck, okay? And that it was a very pro-life book, and that is a very political choice. So if sparkly vampire books can be books about like abortion and pro-life, then yeah, like books are political. I don't know how else to like break it down. You know, there are better booktubers out there who have broken this down in like in like better terms, like Jack Edwards and Cindy Pham. But
yeah, I mean, as for like our engagement with this, like we're going to continue to read books and explore their political themes because, I mean, inherently our book club is also political because we have the very radical position of diverse books are good.
Yeah. Another discourse, I think it kind of like branched off of this topic of like are books political, blah, 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 is there aren't enough middle grade and YA books for boys. So there's been like this conversation around how boys aren't reading books because most of the books that are being marketed towards mainstream media are books about girls. And, you know, they're not going to read books about girls. So we should fix that. And I'm like, okay, even that sentiment is political.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing is like it needs to they need to have like a caveat being like recent books may be more girl skewed, but that's only because in the grand scheme of the canon of American literature, I'm sure there's way more stories about boys than girls.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, even like middle grade and young adult, those are two. I mean, like, I don't want to call them genres, but, you know, like audience levels, like marketing terms that didn't exist like 10 years ago. Okay. Like there was like children's book and then there were adult books. So when they say like boys aren't reading enough, they're not like connecting to these female protagonists. I'm like, I read books where there were like boy protagonists, male protagonists. Like you don't have to relate to the protagonists to enjoy a story. That's like the fact that you're saying that we have to center stories around boys and men, that is kind of like that is very messed up. And considering that with like young adult stories, they found out that if they market towards teen girls, they're going to be very enthusiastic about it, and therefore they are going to buy these books. They kind of tapped into the fangirl tendencies for capitalism. So it's like supply and demand, you know?
Yeah, I think this is definitely like a very biased point of view. But I mean, it's based in some like anecdotal evidence, right? Like I think if you look at, even if you look at our listenership, like people who listen to Books and Boba are overwhelmingly female, according to Spotify stats. And I think, I don't know if it's because there's not enough stories about boys getting boys to read. It's just, I feel like boys are getting their content elsewhere, like from anime, from
yeah,
like
I think so too.
Right?
I think
like,
they're reading manga. I think they're reading graphic novels and comics. And those are actually, you know, they're reading materials, they count. Or they're reading adult fiction, science fiction, mysteries, and it's, you know, not being collected into the data. So, yeah, I feel like there's a lot of layers to this conversation and a lot of missed points. It's not just like one thing.
Yeah. The lesson can't be, oh, we're focusing too much on girls because like much like the whole, much like affirmative action, like we're just making up for centuries of not focusing on girls, right? And
oh, yeah.
You can see a lot of the backlash currently in our political, you know, environment is a backlash against, hey, how about we focus on non-white, non-men people for just a little bit, like just to like kind of bring everyone up to an equal playing field. And you know, what was that quote? To people in privilege, like equality is oppression, right?
Yeah. I think also like just gendering literature it's not great.
Yeah.
Because you can read whatever you want, and really like the gendering is just a marketing tactic. But also, like, you have to acknowledge the fact that maybe for certain areas, reading is seen as like a female activity, and boys are encouraged to like do sports or, you know, do quote unquote manly things, leave the reading for like the women. And maybe that stereotypes get perpetuated and it's stopping boys from being nerdy, quote unquote, and you know, engaging in nerdy hobbies. And I'm like, whatever, just I feel like kids are gonna find a way to read whatever they want. Just this idea that there are not enough books for boys, I think it's a little bit ridiculous.
It's a little silly, yeah, for sure. All right, and moving on to our final bit of news, which is the 2024 Goodreads Choice Awards are back. Voting has begun for the first. Is this the first round of?
Yeah, this is the opening round.
Yeah, I know that the Goodreads Choice Awards has become very embattled in recent years, but at the same time, we do have quite a few books that were featured in Books and Boba on the short list. So I think, or at this point, they're long lists, right?
Yeah, they're long lists. So this is the opening round, and the final round will take place from November 26th to December 1st, and the winners will be announced on December 5th. And like that's why there's like so many books in these categories now.
Yeah, so we'll include all of the books by Asian American authors that we found on the long list in our show notes, but we wanted to quickly highlight some of the nominees that are former Books and Boba books. So moving down the list, nominated for both readers' favorite fiction as well as debut novel, we have Welcome to Hyunam-dong Bookshop by Hwang Bo-rum and Greta and Valden by Rebecca Kate Riley. So really cool to see two book club picks on this list.
Yeah, and those two are probably like in like my top 5 books that we've read for this year. So like I'm very happy to see them on there and getting recognition.
Yeah. For fantasy novel, we have The Night Ends with Fire by Kaek Song. This is was this the Mulan?
This is the Mulan reimagining.
Yeah, this was the Mulan reimagining with like spiritual magic creatures. And we had KX on our podcast for an author chat. So definitely check that out. Congrats to KX on the nomination. For young adult fantasy, we have Of Jade and Dragons by Amber Chen, another Chinese-inspired fantasy. This one is another, another story about a young girl pretending to be a boy, this time in an engineering academy in a silk punk inspired fantasy world. So lots of I mean, I don't want to keep calling it a Mulan story, but like a lot of, you know, cross-dressing is a big, like, it's one of our favorite tropes, right? Especially because stories set in worlds based on like imperial China, very patriarchal. So you kind of have to, you know, do that if you want to have a female protagonist. Also
very political, you know, women, you know, being able to do jobs just as well, even better than men in male dominated fields. Yeah, political.
Yeah. And finally, for young adult fiction, A Bum Me for Two by Trinity Wing is also nominated. We had Trinity on for an author chat about her fun sapphic rom-com about two foodies in Vietnam. So congrats to Trinity on the nomination as well. You know, plenty more. There's a ton of Asians on this list. So if you want to do your part, you know, check out our show notes and go in and, you know, give them your vote. It would be great to see a sizable representation of Asian authors in the final voting rounds. So
you know what I just found out earlier this morning? That to be nominated for a Goodreads Choice Awards, your book has to have a 3.5 star rating.
Really?
Yeah. Ooh. I was like, but what about all of the...
Yeah, on a platform that's prone to review bombing and like shenanigans, that's kind of, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, like I said, a very embattled awards program, but you know, for better or worse, like Goodreads is still a central hub for the book community.
I will say, if I could move away from Goodreads, I would, because I don't want to give Jeff Bezos like more of my time than I do already because of Amazon, and Amazon owns Goodreads. I am slowly making my way back to Storygraph. I made an account like a couple years ago, but I like just never really like went ham on the app. So yeah, it's kind of like Twitter and like Blue Sky. Like we're like slowly finding alternative
apps. For sure. I know definitely I've been toying with the idea of just moving off of Twitter altogether, just because I don't know. It just feels icky there right now. It's very icky. Although I will say, like, people who are in the book sphere, the protest sphere, very vocal on Twitter, despite the very Trump promoted ads on there. Oh, there's so many. There's so many. You can't, like, no matter how many accounts you block and like how much you curate your feed, they still show up. So it's very annoying. The Twitter board forcing that sale turned out to be the worst decision they've ever made. Yeah. Yeah. But they got their money, so yay. All right. Well, with that, that'll do it for this mid-month book news check-in for November 2024. Veera, thanks once again for compiling all of the book news for our episode today. Yes, before we go, can you remind our listeners what we are reading for book club for November? Yes, so we are reading Interior Chinatown by Charles Yu, and a Hulu series about to come out. I think the premiere was yesterday, but no, the premiere is actually next Friday, the 22nd. Oh, so was it a press screening that like our friends went to? Well, okay, the premiere, like the live premiere, I think was yesterday. The premiere on Hulu is next week. So I see. Okay. Yeah. I'm excited to finish the book and also listen to the audiobook and then watch the television series. I feel like I'm going to be very immersed in Interior Chinatown for the next few weeks. Yeah, and the pilot for Interior Chinatown, it's written by the author, Charles Yu. So one of those rare situations where the author is writing the script. Yeah, I mean, he is a television writer, right? He's probably most well known for being the story editor for Westworld. So yeah, looking forward to it. As always, we are reading along week to week on Discord, so if you are a member of our Patreon, head over there and join us in our discussions. And for everyone else, if you have finished the book and have thoughts to share, please let us know on Goodreads. We're still there for now. And we always love to include feedback from our listeners in our discussion episodes whenever possible. But yeah, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Books and Boba, and we'll see you all next time. Bye, everybody. Bye. Thanks for listening to Books and Boba. This podcast was hosted by Marvin Yue and Veera Yu and edited and produced by Marvin Yue. Follow the book club on Twitter and Instagram by going to @BooksandBoba and engage with us on Goodreads on our Goodreads group. You can also check out past episodes of the podcast by going to booksandboba.com and by subscribing to us on your favorite podcast app. Don't forget, you can support Books and Boba and Asian American authors by purchasing books at our bookshop.org account. Check out the link in our show notes and also at booksandboba.com. Books and Boba is a proud member of the Potluck Podcast Collective, a collective of Asian American hosted podcasts featuring unique voices and stories from the Asian diaspora. Learn more about the collective and check out our fellow Potluck shows by visiting the website podcastpotluck.com. Thanks for listening.
Hey Candace, we are so excited to have you join me and Kathy for a brand new season of the Korean Drama Podcast, the podcast about watching Korean dramas by people who don't watch Korean dramas.
I'm so excited to join the podcast, but where's Kathy? She said she'd meet us here.
Candace, I'm right here.
Why is Kathy's voice coming from this chicken meatball?
So, funny story. I was so busy watching Korean dramas on my phone to prepare for this podcast that I accidentally walked into a mysterious machine and got turned into food. And, excuse me, Kim, I'm obviously a chicken nugget.
Agree to disagree.
Well, that's a weird coincidence because for our 5th season of the Korean Drama Podcast, we're watching the comedy sci-fi series Chicken Nugget.
Join us each week as we discuss the highs and lows of Chicken Nugget episode by episode.
So grab a snack, maybe not chicken nuggets, and follow us on your favorite podcast app, part of the Potluck Podcast Collective.
You're totally going to eat me, aren't you?